Hello everybody and welcome to this amazing discussion covering what happened during the official Dead by Daylight's 2-year anniversary escape tournament. You may have heard the various rumors of the events that transpired and various memes and hashtags spawn in the event, such as Valhalla and hashtag Martha was robbed. I'm here to tell the story about everything that occurred in the most objective manner that I can. I'll cover what happened and how it happened. I waited a while to make this video simply because I wanted to make sure that I had the full story, and now that Behavior has released their official statement on the outcome and I've gotten the replies that I sought after, I believe I could put this video together. Everything begins on June 14, 2018 when Behavior announced the 2-year anniversary escape tournament to be hosted by Space eSports and offering the winning team a prize of $5,000 to be split among them.
Tournament? An official Dead by Daylight tournament?
Our first official Dead by Daylight tournament organized by Space eSports. After the stream, I will post every link that you need to sign up. There is one day for every platform though, so everyone can participate again. And there are prize money and also really cool other prizes.
After the announcement, players scrambled to gather their teams, and an unexpectedly high number of players signed up. With 174 teams for just the PC tournament, there was a clear and overwhelming presence for participation in the Dead by Daylight tournaments. Behavior even made an announcement that they'd be closing registration early and announcing teams would ultimately be entered into the tournament as they were handpicked into the 16 available slots per tournament on PC and both consoles. After 24 hours, the bracket was then settled and this selection was made. Teams that contain popular influencers were chosen, such as Admiral Baru, Marth88, Noob3, and many more. As the tournament begins, so does the derailing of what should have been a great anniversary tournament. A massive series of misfortunate events made it into another meme of the Dead by Daylight community. So we'll go ahead and break this down to several sections that I would deem the most important to review in regards to what happened so we can figure out why it happened. We'll begin with Space eSports. They're the esports group that took up the task of hosting the escape tournament. They were officially backed by Behavior, being specifically picked to handle the tournament. This was not the only Dead by Daylight tournament for them to handle either. Space eSports also hosted the Saw tournament and Nightmare on Elm Street tournament not too long ago. So who is Space eSports? Well, there's not too much information on who made and how they were made, but Space eSports created their Facebook page back in November of 2017. They host tournaments with games such as Overwatch, Call of Duty, and Dead by Daylight, often using the Battlefield or Battlefy website. And that's pretty much all there is I have on them. They keep majority of their content related to the tournaments they host and do a pretty good job keeping everything clean. With experience behind the Dead by Daylight name, it seems that the tournament should have progressed without issue, but as rumors would have it, it was a clear disaster. First, some of the primary issues begin by the tournament's rules themselves, and this is a problem before the tournament even begins. If you were to review the rules, we can see that the game allows for all killers and survivors to be picked. There are no perks, items, offerings, or add-ons allowed, and the game counts points for each survivor that escapes or is killed, as well as points to each team. So if 2 escape, that's 2 points to the surviving team, and since 2 died, 2 points go to the killing team. The map that'll be played in every match is Coal Tower, so as you can see, this is gonna be a bit dry. Based on the rule set, I can easily point out the few problems with this format, and first you have the killers having no perks or add-ons available, and that leaves only one killer worth picking: the nurse. There is no killer capable of competing on a comparable and competitive level to the nurse without any add-ons to give them the boost to match her. Then when it came to survivors, though they may not pick perks, it's all too common for teams to run 4 Claudettes in prestige clothing to hide in the dark map that is Coal Tower. Any players that went against this standard faced certain defeat, as we saw some interesting killer choices such as the Trapper and Myers, but ultimately both those players were absolutely demolished by the nurse. With the tournament having a high forecast of nurses and prestige Claudettes over the rainbow, it really eliminates any varied style of play, leaving several players in the community upset at the results, since you could simply call out the results of the game if one nurse was picked and another killer wasn't nurse. Of course, this only applies to PC, as the nurse isn't nearly as popular on console due to her difficulty at the lower frame rates and poor control with the controller itself. Otherwise, the PC portion of the tournament was very predictable, which leads us to the next issue. Within the first few games of the tournament, it became very clear to everybody that the casting for the tournament itself was very detached from the community. The commentary itself was deemed dry and lacking any relevancy to Dead by Daylight. The information provided about the game was also at times pretty inaccurate, or something basic and expected from a lower level, more casual player, or people who just aren't familiar with Dead by Daylight.
That's one thing that I personally hadn't thought about before we actually started doing the tournaments, was people using the chainsaw dash, not necessarily for trying to just trying to hit people, but actually just using it for like increased mobility.
See right here, she goes straight off the Valhalla. Insta down coming for sure if he gets near you. He's gonna be looking to power up, and stage 3 Super Saiyan underway.
From here, the community began to demand for different casters with more experience of the game. Information leaked of the caster's in-game hours for PC being in the double digits, causing the community to lash out and ridicule him for his lack of knowledge in the game. Though his defense was he played mostly on the PS4, it was mostly scoffed at due to the commentary not matching someone with experience in Dead by Daylight. Distaste within the community began to rise as various forum posts and Reddit posts were being made expressing distaste and dislike for the tournament in the various issues that were arising. It got so out of hand on Reddit, it prompted the mods to create a mega thread to contain the amount of posts being made. Some Reddit posts even encouraged other users to leave reviews on the Space eSports Facebook page, piling on negative reviews which would eventually lead them to make their review page private. With the community freaking out and lashing out against both behavior and Space eSports, what was their response? Well, they actually listened to the community. With the call to new casters, they called upon the EU community manager, Gitawid, to help commentate for the remainder of the PC tournament. With a fresh breath of air, Gitawid would continue to satisfy the community with improved casting for the remainder of the PC tournament, and then also provide commentary for both the Xbox and PS4 tournaments. Space eSports would later reach out to myself to help cast alongside Gitawid for the Xbox tournament. Though the improvement to the casting was refreshing, the damage had been done and the viewership started to suffer, dropping considerably for the following console tournaments. However, we could also argue that there just wasn't as many viewers for the console tournaments in the first place, but the reputation at this point was a bit out of hand. Space eSports continued to try their best to please the community, but other controversies began to arise. The biggest controversy occurred in the finals of the PC tournament. The rules state that the party that finds the hatch first during a hatch standoff will gain the point. As an example, if the killer is on the hatch before the survivor reaches the hatch, the killer will be rewarded as if they got a kill, regardless if the survivor escapes. However, if the survivor is on the hatch first, they would then receive the point as if they had escaped, even if they were grabbed from jumping in. And this happened to be an occurrence between the Deep Hip Squad and Tournament Monsters.
That is fantastic. Sailing play.
It was a very dangerous situation for the tournament. It very well could have been that...
Who found this first?
Oh no.
That's the question.
Oh no, I think he was standing on it, and he hit him.
A decision would have to be made by Space eSports, and after a bit of talking amongst themselves, they returned to declare that that was not a hatch standoff, and the nurse striking the Claudette before the hatch was open was indeed giving the survivor a way out. And due to this, there was a massive uproar. The community became really split, including me. One half of the community supported the decision from Space eSports, while the other one supported Martha88 as killer, that he did indeed have the game won, and making that swing should not have cost him that game. But there were several debates in the forums condemning Marth for making a rookie mistake within a tournament. They would go on to argue that you never assume the rules and he should just never have swung and just stood there and caught her if she jumped in, allowing the refs to come in. Though any veteran player could see it, I understand their point of view, and it was based on the ruling that they did not clarify the hatch had to be opened for them to consider it was a standoff. A lot of people have asked me for my opinion on this, so this section is my opinion, therefore what I say here is just how I perceive it and what my thoughts are. After reviewing this footage very carefully, I believe that anyone who considers themselves to be experienced in Dead by Daylight could see that this was a hatch standoff. And even though they clarified that it's not a hatch standoff until the door is open, I believe that a hatch standoff can absolutely start before the door is open. I do it all the time. With an ally already out the door, and an ally dying and in the process of going up to the entity, the hatch is bound to open. If I know the nurse will cut me off at the door, I will run to the hatch and hopefully beat her there. And as long as she downs me out in the hatch, I can jump through. In the footage, we clearly see that they both understand it is the hatch standoff. Marth arrives at the hatch first, on top of it, with Claudette understanding, the nurse has gotten onto the hatch, therefore I will approach the hatch to start the standoff, because if I got struck down away from the hatch, I can't jump in when it opens. Marth looks down at the Claudette, and Claudette looks back at Marth, and they are on top of the hatch. Marth took it upon himself, made the swing. Honestly, that was a standoff right there. The hatch may not have been open, but you see that the final survivor is dying and the hatch swings open literally a second after the fact. And that is when all players knew that was a standoff, but because the Claudette was able to jump into the hatch without being grabbed, it did not count. With all the key components together, you have Marth found the hatch, was on top of it first. Both players knew it was a hatch standoff. The ally of the survivor went out the door to open the hatch because their ally in the basement also let go immediately to begin the sacrifice to get the hatch to open sooner. Everybody knew who was going out the hatch. We all knew, all called it, and the idea that that was not a hatch standoff is just a call made out of ignorance, I would say. It's just the lack of experience to know that that was indeed a hatch standoff. The hatch didn't need to be opened. And if it was opened, again, Marth was there first. It doesn't matter if Claudette jumped in. The rules just stated whoever found it first. It didn't state if Marth was unable to swing. It doesn't. As you can see, the vague rules were really what made this so rough. And in my opinion, it's just a bad call. And that's honestly a discussion to have that I would love to have with several people, but we'll do that another time. I just wanted to give my small opinion on this one bit. Now let's get back to the more objective portion of this video. There was a massive uproar in chat, including myself. Space eSports assured the community that they would escalate the ruling to be made by Behavior, and Behavior would later respond with an official statement declaring that eSports' ruling on the standoff was valid. The ruling that was made was just so controversial, and Space eSports did not take it lightly. Though without the experience within the game's community, the decision just feels so unjustified, which leads to the hashtag Marth was robbed. Whether you agree with it or not, as I may not, the decision was final, and that gave the win to the tournament monsters. Details can be argued, but a clarification for future tournaments was made by Space eSports, clarifying that the hatch standoff will begin only when the hatch is open. They made this post to make the rest of the tournaments run smoothly, and it was a fantastic choice on their part. But moving forward as a community, I can also see that we should all make sure that when we're using terminologies, even if it's got to include camping, body blocking, things of this nature, or whether it's a hatch standoff, be very clear with what we define camping to be, what we define these rules to really be, because when it comes down to it, this kind of assumption, to be honest, again, every veteran of Dead by Daylight understood hatch standoff was beforehand. And so, with that being said, that ends that controversy. That's how that happened, and we'll have to continue along here. And this is because the vague details in the rules is actually a continued theme, because the damage just got worse. Other examples include a team getting multiple rematches despite the rules stating that there's only one restart per team for a disconnect, and there was a team that indeed got 2 rematches. Then, as the PC tournament concluded, the uproar began to die down. The remaining console tournaments would go on as planned with less fanfare, and as the drama died down, a tweet began to gain the community's attention, accusing Space eSports of stealing fan artwork without providing the proper credit. At Benoski73 on Twitter made a post revealing that the promotional artwork for the Escape tournament was actually created by them, and that Space eSports had edited the image and reposted it without giving the credit to the original. Space eSports did respond promptly and properly credited the artist on the final day of the tournament. I reached out to Benoski myself to clarify that there was an apology made. A lot of uproar was made to the stealing of the fan art, and Benoski did respond, stating that they did get the apology and was eventually given the credit. However, they did wish that the credit was given to them from the beginning. As all the tournaments finally began to wrap up and the finals for the Xbox tournament came to an end that I casted for, I got to talk to the Space eSports team and get a wid and kind of figure out where did all these decisions come from, what happened, how did the artwork get stolen, and just how did this become such a train wreck? The time that I got to spend casting with them as I was invited on, I had expected this to be quite the shit show. To be honest, I expected the worst of the worst. However, when finally getting in there and casting and getting to talk to them, they let me ask all the questions I wanted, and they were very open with me and very kind. And it's just kind of odd to be able to see this end of them while the community is in such a massive uproar against them. From beginning to end, Space eSports did their best to please the community that is not always welcoming. The community was standard from their prior tournaments at Dead by Daylight. However, due to this being an official tournament sponsored by Behavior, getting the official shout out from Behavior, it probably got a lot more traction than before, and with more eyes from the community resting on the tournament, things were bound to get a little out of hand. Really, when you look at it, I don't believe it was Space eSports' fault either. With everything that happened, it was really misfortunate from the casting not being what the community expected, and this is simply because people like me host tournaments for Dead by Daylight all the time. The casting is with people who are very experienced with the community, know what to say that resonate well within the community. So when Space eSports becomes the official tournament of Dead by Daylight, you've got eyes expecting to see what the smaller community within has already done. With such high expectation, I'm pretty sure unless they also devoted thousands of hours to the game, I don't see them having that kind of knowledge of in-depth commentating that people were really expecting. Especially again, this was supposed to be the 2-year anniversary. Not only that, but the community was kind of already rubbed the wrong way. We went on a dry spell for approximately 3 months with no updates. We were all craving something to fix the game, as the game is not in the best state it can be, and the game is slowly being worked on, but at this moment, likely a lot of the community was just agitated at the game itself and seeing that the anniversary of an official tournament was just not what they expected. So why did this all happen? What made it all flop if Space eSports did not mean harm to the community? Well, it comes from a variety of things. I believe that Dead by Daylight's developers did not really interact much with Space eSports on this situation. I do not believe that they were prepared for the community to approach this the way they did. With having to handpick the teams from a very large pool of players, I could see that would already leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths that wanted to participate for $5,000. Truthfully, I think that one of the primary reasons this all happened was simply due to a lack of preparation from both Space Esports and behavior. Things such as the artwork being mistaken as an original and not being credited to the artist comes down to a chain of command. It is not like Space Esports intentionally took the artwork, but instead it was more like a chain of command. The person who originally got the artwork edited and passed it on as an original just didn't tell anybody, and people like me, for example, would never have known that belonged to an artist, so I wouldn't have known it needed to be credited. So I wouldn't again go off to just blame Space Esports for not knowing. I wouldn't even know how they would find out, but definitely an internal search and investigation on who passed that artwork upwards should be had, and whether they've done that or not is not something I know, but I'm sure they would have done. But they did eventually give credit, and to be honest, I can't just hold a grudge forever when they did their best to make right out of a wrong situation. Overall, I truthfully think that Space Esports tried their best, and looking back at everything, I could not hold it against them for everything that happened. I truthfully believe this to just be a series of misfortunate events. Sadly, I do not believe they meant any of this to happen. They absolutely tried to prevent as much as possible and remedied every issue that came up. Even though they were bombarded with massive negativity through false reviews, one starring them and hitting their Facebook page hard, through the massive criticism against them, and honestly, some of the criticism was, legitimate and justified. But I mean, the way that the community handles things sometimes can be a little overwhelming and aggressive. And overall, I have to give props to Space Esports for holding it together and still answering back properly. Though the community can still walk away with some good memes, I think they did a pretty good job so far. They definitely could have done better, and I hope that down the line both Behavior and Space Esports continue to grow, and hopefully we as a community can learn to look at the red flags before this kind of stuff happens and assist Behavior into understanding what would be good or bad for the community. And that's all I have that I could get for you guys regarding the second year anniversary escape tournament by Dead by Daylight. What are your thoughts? Were there any stories that you wanted to see on here that didn't quite make it in? Or were there stories that you wanted told? Did this clarify anything for you? Like I said, I know there's several controversies regarding bans and players that couldn't make it in, so you can go ahead and let me know what those are down in the comments down below. But of course, if I couldn't prove them, I left them out. I wanted to be as objective as I could, and I understand that some of my opinions made it in regarding the hatch standoff, which is fine. So let me know your opinions. Let me know how you feel about the situation. What would you like to see in future tournaments? This was a hard video to make. I appreciate the patience you guys had, but this is the summary of what the big debacle was about in regards to the hatch standoff, the artwork, and everything that went wrong with the tournament. Of course, there were things of drama before the tournament even began in regards to certain people not making it in and that controversy there. And again, players may not agree on the hatch standoff part itself, which is fine, but just let me know in the comments below. I appreciate you sitting through this. Thank you so much. You're a beautiful person. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.